Hi everyone, I'm Max. I just wanted to take you through a project that we recently finished up. It was a lot of fun. I thought this would be a good project to highlight. It's a front yard with no lawn, which is something that, is always something's difficult to perform well, and it's a little bit of a leap of faith when you try to take something like this on. Fortunately, this homeowner had already started something like that. It just lacked a little bit of what I would call structure. Some of the plants over the years that they had done that with struggled, and we just needed to give this thing a little bit more interest, a little bit more focal, something to be able to build from, and then as this grows and matures, it's going to really have some nice bones to it. All right, so one of the things about this garden that the homeowner was not happy with and why they called us was they had just at maybe 5 or 6 years ago redone this whole landscape and removed all the grass because it was struggling just because of all these trees. And the previous designer, landscaper, they had just filled in and just kind of removed grass and then just put a whole bunch of ground cover and a whole bunch of different varieties of ground cover and none of it really took off. But when I took this on, I was like, okay, we need more interest than just the ground cover lining the outsides of the walkway here and all the ground cover in. I wanted to bring some height to this garden. I wanted to bring some structure to this garden, which we were totally lacking before. So I love a good, strong boxwood hedge. And some people have this really knee-jerk reaction where they don't enjoy boxwood hedges. They just feel like they're too formal or whatever. I like them because as this thing grows here, I'm hoping for it to get about this tall, this wide, and it to be a nice squared off rectangular hedge. The reason I like hedges so much in that regard is because if I have a really nice structured hedge and that's taken care of well, I can have a whole bunch of chaos around that where I can let my plants be a little more naturalized. I can let them do their thing and I don't have to worry about, does this landscape look clean? My boxwood hedge will do that for me a lot. One of the other things on this project that I think was really important was we have these big trees here, which would be our canopy, but it lacked what we'd call understory trees. It lacked some eye-level interest, so we planted a dogwood here off the end of this walkway here, so as you walk up this walkway, you'll get a really nice view of this, four-season tree really with what it does throughout the year. And then I'd also like to talk about, what a great job our GOB retail services do. They've built this beautiful pot for me, this container. The process here is essentially, I designed the location, the size of the pots, and I work that out with the homeowner. And then our retail services gives their homeowners a call, and they meet them down at the garden center. They pick out their containers, they pick out their plants, and then all of a sudden one day they just show up. They can be cumbersome, right? You're throwing soil in the back of your car, this big container that's heavy, and to have this just showing up looking like this is a really great treat. And then, with a yard like this that already has irrigation, we can very easily simply add, a little drip line to it. So this is just run on our timer, and this will just get water on its own. Something else to highlight in this garden that was a really nice touch and that our team just did a beautiful job on. He's like, well, how about we do some gravel around these trees, because very difficult to get anything to grow, at the immediate trunk of this tree. So we did a little bit of boulder work. Something that I think is really important when you do boulder work is 80% of that rock is buried, right? But it looks like it's coming out of the earth and it looks natural. And then just the stone work that's done around it. And over the years, this will kind of get a little bit worked in with the mulch and look even more natural. But the team really knocked it out of the park in this. And we added that little detail up at the front entrance as well. That helps with some drainage for the downspouts. Going through here, it makes it easy to walk through. These downspouts can kind of work their way into it. We've done that on both sides, and it's just a simple, just naturalized little walk. And over the years, as the plants grow more, it'll become, less pronounced as it is. I have to admit, in general, this wouldn't be something that I would have done, but it was here, it existed, and it was thriving, and it looked really nice. And then, so what I thought might, really be a nice touch is the really deep green of the boxwood being real structured and having a nice backdrop would really kind of help pull out the color of this yellow tint, variegated IP in front of it. And I think over the years, as these boxwoods get up a little taller and fill in, I really think that's going to be a nice addition to this garden. Something else that I like to do a lot in my gardens, I like to do is a fair bit of leaf texture. You know, it's not all about color. So in this garden, we had opportunity because of the shade. We could plant some nice larger leaf hostas with some ferns in front of it. One of my favorite plants that you will almost always see on a design, if I can get it in, is a clethra. You know, this is a pretty common thing that you'll see from me, boulder, clethra. Reason I like clethra, it has a nice sweet little smell to it. These come in a white and a pink. It's a pretty upright shrub, which, you know, most things that kind of get rounded in. So in a garden, when we're trying to create different elevations, different shapes, it's just another opportunity to be able to create that upright. In a garden, we want to have movement, we want to have smell, we want to have color and sight. This just kind of creates a lot of that for you in your garden. So something I think that's important to kind of touch on a project like this is this already had what I would call a landscape. And it didn't really need to be torn out, it didn't really need to be redone. The thing that was, you know, how I took the approach of this was not like, what does it need? It was more like, what's it lacking? And when I kind of figured out what it was lacking, which was structure and elevation to the garden, the rest just kind of came really quick. Because at first, you know, you're kind of like, where do I start with this project? Where do I even go? But I kind of was like, hey, let's just start with what we've got, so we're not just completely starting from scratch, and just give it what it needs. So, and this garden in itself would not be generally what I would consider my style. My style is generally more a little bit like simple, minimalist. You know, we've got just, you know, a small variety of plants and shrubs in the garden. But, you know, sometimes you have to adapt to the site, you have to adapt to what the client has and what they want. And budgets, of course, are always something that you have to keep in mind. So I think what I did here is when I added these boxwoods, when I added the tree and a handful of, you know, the flowering shrubs, that's what this garden was missing. And once you added those to this garden, it made a really big impact. You know, the other thing in this garden that I think was very impactful was the use of containers. Myself, when I'm designing a garden, especially here in Nashville, we're always looking for a little bit of height, something in that 6 foot tall range. And we're limited on the plant choices that we can make for that. It's like, oh, are you gonna use a Taylor juniper that's just this really upright thing? Or are you gonna plant something that you know in 5 or 6 years you're gonna have to replace because it's gonna outgrow the space? So for me, I utilized container gardening. You know, I can get a pot that's already 3-4 foot tall, I plant something in that, and all of a sudden I get this height, this elevation, relatively easy to care for, and you know, it can get changed out seasonally if you want. And it just adds a lot of interest, a lot of elegance to a garden that sometimes they lack. So as we close out here, you know, I think something to kind of keep in mind, and if you're interested in a no lawn landscape, you know, this was a pretty good example of what's possible and, you know, what we can do for you. So, you know, if you're interested in that, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to, you know, meet you at your site and go through things with you. You know, maybe we can work, you know, together, bring some of your style, bring some of my style to make things look like what you're hoping for.